Citrus includes species that are tropical, species that are from temperate zone that are cold hardy, and species that evolved in deserts, xeric environments. So it's a very diverse group of species. It's very interesting. They're all, for the most part, diploid. They're highly heterozygous, which means that there's a lot of diversity, both intra-species and between species. You can have citrus. There's a species native to Hong Kong that grows in rocky, kind of poor soils. The fruit is the size of a pea. Okay, and then you have other citrus like this. This is a small one. Like this is a tropical species native to the Thailand, Malaysia area. This is called a pomelo. And this is a small pomelo. Pomelos can get to the size of a basketball. Okay, very large. And this is this is a tropical species. In contrast to most other tree fruit crops, most other tree fruit crops are one species was domesticated, and all the varieties originate from a single species, except for very little introgression of things like disease resistances. Citrus, most commercial citrus is of interspecific hybrid origin, okay, which is very different from most other tree crops. And in citrus, if you look at everything from tangelos to lemons to oranges to grapefruit, have two of three species that are true species. This is a true species. This is called a pomelo. The English call it a shaddock. This species is, like I said, native to the area of Thailand and Malaysia. One very interesting character about it that allowed its use in breeding and has had a major impact on modern breeding is that it's monoembryonic. All the seeds in this fruit are of sexual origin, okay? Just like you are all of sexual origin in your parents, and you are not genetically identical to your mother, and you are not genetically identical to your sibling unless they are identical twins. Okay? Identical twins is cloning. Apomixis is cloning via seed in the plant world, okay? Apomixis. And citrus has a special kind of apomixis called nucellar embryo. This species does not have that, okay? So this is a true species, and we said it's native to the tropics. Another true species, this is a what Americans would call a tangerine, what most people in the world call a mandarin. So the mandarin originated in the cool subtropics, okay? It originated probably somewhere between North Vietnam and southern China, Hunan, Hubei, that sort of area, southern China. And it was a small fruit. It has very thin peel. As you can see, it's got what we call a zipper skin. And you notice that it has hardly no albedo, okay? In citrus, the orange part of the peel is called flavoido. The white part is called albedo, like alba, which means white, okay? And so this would be very similar to the tangerine or mandarin that was domesticated by man in southern China. Most of them are very tart. I haven't tasted this one today. And they're seedy, okay? And so, okay. So this would be, and you notice that it plugs when you pull it, right? So this would be very similar to what was domesticated maybe 4,000 years ago, somewhere. Okay. That is a true species.
Okay.
That species can have both zygotic individuals and individuals that are highly nucellar. So go ahead, just pass it around. Okay. So that's called Citrus reticulata, or mandarin. This is called Citrus grandis. The third true species that gave rise to modern commercial citrus is a species that's native to eastern India. Okay? This happens to be a mutant form of it.
One of these trees.
No, I spent $10.
Oh, that's what I was.
My wife said, bring it home. Anyway, this is a citron. It's native to eastern India. Again, it's tropical. Okay, it's adapted to high pH soils, dry soils, and so this is called Citrus medica. This is also exclusively sexual. Okay, I know of no apomictic citron varieties. Okay? And this citrus is used to peel. You can peel this and eat the albedo. It's almost like eating an apple. It's not very sweet, but it's not bitter, it's not sour unless you cook it. Okay? Now, so we had this species. This might have been the golden apple, okay, of ancient Western history. Right? So this would have made it to the Mediterranean before Christ. This would have been at Greek times, in the Greeks, Alexander the Great. This would have made it to the Mediterranean from India. One of the progenitors, true species, Citrus medica. Something else.
Go ahead. So this has seeds inside.
It'll have this one because it's blue stem. But if it was a standard citron,
It would have. Yeah.
it would have. And the thing with this fruit, in a normal one, it can be very big. But what you'll see is that more than half of it will be peeled, because what you eat is the peel. Okay. If you take the central part that has the juice vesicles and juice it, it's very hard to get, but it's extremely acid. You can put a pound of sugar in there and there's no hope. Okay, so this made it to the Mediterranean.
What's its common name?
This citron. And the way that you eat it here in the United States is in fruitcake during Thanksgiving and Christmas. Okay, the peel is
Flavoring agent.
yeah, it's put in a brackish water, fermented, and then that is incorporated in the baking process to make fruitcakes. Number one producer of citron in the world, Brazil. Okay, so
I didn't know that.
yeah, it used to be Puerto Rico, no longer. So, time of we said at the time the Greeks. Sometime later on, probably around the time of Romans, also from India, the sour orange arrived. This is a interspecific hybrid. So we've said the three true species: citron, mandarin, and pomelo. This arrived via the silk trade, right? The camel caravans from India all the way to the Mediterranean. Okay? So if you look at the old history and you look at the old Spanish literature, and a lot of Westerners, they read it and they see naranja and they say, oh, that's an orange. It's an orange, but it's a sour orange. It's not the true orange. Okay? But this arrived in the Mediterranean. Sometime early on, probably after the time of Christ, this hybridized with this. Now, you would say this is, we said previously, this is 100% sexual. This is highly apomictic, meaning that the seedlings are highly clonal, right? So contrary to what you would expect, these two hybridized, but citron was the male, okay? And it is the modern lemon. When you go to the supermarket and you buy a Eureka or a Lisbon lemon for your drinks or making lemon pie or lemonade, it's a hybrid of these two species. And the way we know that this was the mom is because other than nucleus, what organelles in the plant have DNA? Mitochondria and plastids, chloroplasts. Okay, so in plants, mitochondria, plastids, and nuclei have DNA. Well, if you look at the markers, the DNA markers in the mitochondria and in the chloroplasts of lemon, turns out. So you know who the mom was. Just like if they do your mitochondrial DNA, they know who your mother was. Okay? That is diverse. Okay, so lemon, the commercial lemon probably originated in the Mediterranean of two species that came from India. Well, one species and one hybrid. All right. And we said that this was a hybrid of pomelo and mandarin. All right. So then you move forward 1,400 years, almost 1,400, maybe 1,200. Vasco da Gama and the Portuguese make it around Cape Horn and arrive in Asia. When they get to southeastern China, they find the modern orange, the sweet orange, also called naranja in Spanish, but naranja dulce. Okay? This arrived much later, and it quickly displaced the sour orange as a crop. So in the old literature in the talk oranges, they talk about the elephant. Okay? This is probably the largest clonal organism on the planet, one, at least definitely in agriculture. Okay? Think about it. This arose in southern China as a hybrid of pomelo and mandarin. Okay? And pomelo was the mom because we know of the plastic. Okay? Chloroplast. And somewhere, probably, maybe North Vietnam, maybe Guangxi province in China, a bee hybridized a mandarin and a pomelo. It gave rise to a hybrid that was better. The mandarin happened to be pomegranate. Right? So that plant grew, the farmer liked it. In those days, farmers didn't know how to bud. But guess what? This one, when you planted 100 seed, 99% of the plants were just the same. They were just as good. Yeah, you're following me? So that farmer, the neighbor got seed. His neighbor got seed. Somebody on a boat goes to Thailand, takes seed. They go to India, take seed. The Portuguese come around, take seed to Europe. Columbus takes it to the New World. Millions upon millions of trees on the planet, all derived from one plant via cloning. Right? There's a huge amount of variation in oranges. You can have small oranges, large oranges, oranges with red flesh due to lycopene, like tomatoes or watermelon. You can have oranges that have no seed, oranges that have seed, oranges that produce a secondary fruit, like a navel orange. Oranges without acid that are insipidly sweet, very sweet. There's a huge amount of variation. All that variation is due to mutation, okay? And just like the example I use in my classes is that if they take one of us, like me, stick me in a blender and grind me up and extract out 1,000 nuclei from my body and take enucleated egg cells and put my nuclei and raise 100 Jose's, we're not, and all 100 of us are not going to be identical, okay? Some of us might be a little darker, some of us a little heavier, a little skinnier, hopefully. One of them might have green eyes. But those are mutants. And all of us are chimeras. It doesn't matter who it is. You pick any person out of a group, any person in Gainesville, that person is a chimera. It just depends on how big the cell is. Okay? So these chimeras are the ones that gave rise to these mutants in oranges. So those are naturally occurring chimeras that have given rise to a huge amount of variation in oranges. Grapefruit's the same way. Grapefruits were originally seedy, white grapefruit. Today you have white, pink, red, and dark red grapefruit. You have grapefruit that have seed and no seed. All those are from mutations. And those trees were originally chimeras. Okay. If you look, we said here that we said here's an example of a mutant in an orange. This orange, this is a Washington navel. It originated as a mutation in Brazil from an orange, pretty much like this. Okay, and what happened was that this mutated, and a gene very similar to the A gammas gene in the ontogeny and development of the flower. What happens is there's a group of cells that sort of lose their position. So imagine there's a group of cells. Flowers differentiate from the outside in. So as the meristem is differentiating, sepals differentiate first, then petals, then anthers, then an ovary. Now imagine in the cells that are making the final part of the ovary, they get lost. I'm like, guys, you don't have the direction. You know, you say, you know what? I'm supposed to be making an ovary. All of a sudden, they start making an ovary all over again. You understand? So this group of cells, instead of being terminally differentiated as part of these carpels here, they'd make a secondary fruit. And it turns out that this Buddha's hand is an analogous mutation. You see the fingers inside? That's a fruit inside of a fruit. It's the analogous condition of navel. Citrus is a commercial citrus tree is an artificial chimera. You have a rootstock, which is one genotype, and typically here we use a lot of hybrids that are hybrids of this species, which is called Pansaris. This is a deciduous, cold hardy species native to central China, and this plant is currently dormant. So it's deciduous. It's very cold hardy as long as it's dormant. Once it comes out of dormancy, it's as susceptible as any other citrus. And this species is inedible. It has very good aroma, but you can't eat it. And it's got it's fuzzy. It has pubescence on the fruit. Go ahead. Yeah. And it's very thorny. Good. So this species is one of the most important species for the breeding of rootstocks, right?
Really nice.
And so this species gives you cold resistance. It gives you resistance to the most important fungal disease of the roots, Phytophthora. Or I misspoke. It's not fungus. It's an algae called an algae. All right. Is a fruit. It's the only citrus that originated in the New World. You notice I said, originated. It didn't evolve in the New World. Right? So what happened was the English brought the shaddock from Asia to the Caribbean. The Spanish had brought the sweet orange. And the bee hybridized the two. And then the Eastern Caribbean, maybe in the island of Dominica or Antigua, the grapefruit arose as a hybrid. Okay, it's intermediate in size. It's juicier than a pomelo, and under warm tropical conditions, the acidity is low. So it's a very good, refreshing fruit. Now, a pomelo, we don't normally eat it here much. Okay, it's really a fruit that's eaten quite a bit in Asia. It's actually used in Chinese New Year's celebrations. Okay, this one it produces a little bit of lycopene. Okay, and this is actually a seedling that I generated here. Sour orange, and that gave rise to the lemon. The lime arose as a hybrid between citron and another species probably native to the Philippines, Citrus macrophylla. But in every case, it turns out that citron was a male. Citron is sort of the Casanova of the citrus species. It has given rise to multiple genotypes, but always as a male, never as a female. Talking about apomixis. So if you plant a pomelo or a citron, 0% of your seedlings will be identical to the mother tree. Okay? If you plant something like swingle rootstock, you're probably averaging around 70-80% identical to the mother plant. If you plant sweet orange, it is probably around 95. Sour orange, probably about 98. If you plant something like satsuma or Dancy tangerines, it's 100. Okay, so 100% palm. So if you want to use them as a parent, you have to use them as a male. Right? You can't. You have to.
if you use them as female, it's like swimming upstream.
You get the same thing.
You get the same thing over and over and over. Okay? So in our breeding program, the material traces back to germplasm that was bred by a USDA breeder named Herb Barrett. He was in the USDA in Orlando, and he was probably one of the best. He's probably the best citrus breeder we've had in 50 years. He's a man who really could have seen material and evaluated and had a very, very clear view of, or vision of what he wanted to do in breeding. And he provided material to Wayne Sherman, who was the previous peach breeder and started the citrus breeding program. And since then, the last 9 years I took over for Dr. Sherman. And so it's been sort of a cooperative building. And for example, the cold hardiness, it's not one career's worth of work. It's cumulative. Just like when you do, when you took chemistry, did you have to learn or did you have to invent what a mole was, what molarity is, what's the normal solution? No, all the stuff you learned is based on previous work. Well, breeding is the same way, it's cumulative. So today, the emphasis of our program is breeding for cold hardiness, but tangerines. The easy part, we think we can have a very strong commercial impact quickly in tangerines. And then the other things take a little bit longer. What they say, the difficult you do now, the impossible, it's a little bit longer. Yes, you can, but the problem is, so if you were going to do that cross, you would use lime as the female, okay? That's the easiest way to do it. The problem is the acidity of the lime. Acidity in many cases tends to be dominant. Okay, so that's a problem.
Get a lemon.
You're going to get something that, you'll get something, it's tart.
Slightly few things added from orange.
So things like, if you want things with good aroma, a parent with really good, desirable volatiles is citron, okay? If you want lots of volatiles, not necessarily desirable, you cross tangerine and pomelo, you're going to get some incredibly awful taste, smelling stuff. But lots of compounds. If you want things like, if you want size and vigor, you use pomelo. Okay, that will give you large fruit size. If you want good color, you want to use a tangerine.
Normally, what would be a time frame for seed to seed?
Okay, so
Breeding.
Citrus in Gainesville, if you make a cross, 4 years from planting the seed, maybe 20% of your seedlings will bloom. The following year, 25, 30. By year 8, 80% will be blooming. So for a breeder, by year 8, you just cut everything. If it didn't bloom by then, you don't want it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you understand? Yeah. And so, because time is an issue, right? Gain is dependent on time, and we have a limited professional life, so you want to go fast, right? And the older you get, like me, the more you worry about time. So we're at a point right now that the investment of Herb Barrett and Wayne Sherman is coming to fruition. We have some very interesting things. In terms of, we're using, previously seedlessness was obtained using very multiple routes, okay? So one way you could get seedlessness was to use self-incompatibility, genetic self-incompatibility. A plant that's self-incompatible cannot self-pollinate. But if that plant is parthenocarpic, or it's able to set fruit in the absence of pollination, and you plant it in isolation, it can produce fruit, right? Something like a clementine. So the seedless clementines you get from Spain and Morocco, they're seedless because they're planted in isolation, and they're self-incompatible and parthenocarpic. You can also get seedless fruit using male sterile. So we talked about satsuma. Satsuma is male sterile. If you plant your grove in isolation and there's no bees, no other pollen source, you'll have fruit that are parthenocarpic and the products that they no seeds. The other breeding programs have used triploid, right? When you have 3 sets of chromosomes in your somatic cells, meiosis doesn't work very well in your ovules and or pollen, right? So those plants tend to not produce seed in their fruit, or you have strong parthenocarpy. Well, all those routes for me were not very, there's problems, both in production and in terms of breeding. And then I read about a mutant from Japan called Kishu, which is got female sterility. It produces functional pollen, but the seeds do not develop. And so and it turns out to be a single dominant gene. And we've used that in many crosses. And we have selections now. It doesn't matter where you plant it, what's beside it, it's always seed. Okay? It's a new paradigm in terms of breeding. And it allows not only the breeder to develop seedless varieties, it allows the grower the maximum amount of flexibility in terms of where and what he plants. Okay. Now, if you look at the industry in Florida today, our #1 problem are diseases. Today, the world is flat. You know, they talk about the world being flat in terms of commerce. Well, the world is absolutely flat in terms of pathogens and pests. Today, you can fly from Orlando, Florida, and be in Brisbane in 20 hours. Okay? That means that there are no isolation barriers for pests and pathogens. If the little critter gets on your clothes or on your luggage or whatever, he hitches a ride. You know, one of the reasons why Australia has such a strong quarantine system is that they had a natural barrier, right? Australia and New Zealand are out in the middle of nowhere. And when the colonists came, you know, if something was sick, it died before it arrived. Right? There was a natural time barrier. Well, today, with commerce. So when I was in your shoes in the 80s, 1985, I took entomology and they told us that on average 4 new insect species would become established in Florida. That means that there was enough individuals that they set up a reproducing population in the state and became established. Today, I bet you there must be. Yeah, we've had, since I've been here, we've had Taiwanese termites, we had citrus psyllid, we've had citrus brown aphid. I mean, those are the ones that I just can think of, right? You know, the new cockroach, Taiwan cockroach. I mean, so today, the biggest problem for a citrus grower is disease, greening, canker. Now we have citrus black spot that was found in the southwest part of the state. Yeah, so that's it.